Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate that, and great lineup of speakers, I have to say. And I'm so happy to hear that it's pretty much booked out. It really tells to how people are coming back to those face-to-face interactions and not just sitting in front of their computer. We need to stop looking like passport photos. It's high time. But anyway, thanks everyone for joining. My last name is a combination of Italian ragu sauce and Japanese ramen noodles put together. Many people struggle with that pronunciation, and after I tell them the pronunciation, they forget my first name but remember my last, which is also fine. So today I'm very happy to be talking to you about this topic of empowerment. It is something that has been haunting me personally in my career simply because I'm someone, just based on the book topic that I just shared about, I'm a very empathetic person in the sense that I sense a lot more than I think. It's not to say that I don't think, but those are some of the aspects that I sense a lot more faster. I also tend to be more of a diplomatic kind of person where I want to make sure that people are agreeing to the solution. I like driving um, towards a common vision. I like when people are passionate about certain things. And I personally have noticed that things tend to be much better in terms of the outcome when people work together towards a common goal. So that being said, it took me a long time in my personal life to understand why and how empathy and so on and so forth. But the other side of it was when you start becoming more empathetic towards things, people automatically assume that, oh, you're a weak person because you succumb to emotions, or you're looking at that as your first layer, or maybe that's the first thing that you notice in someone else. So the flip side of it was I needed to understand how to empower myself and how to promote that as a strong quality while being empathetic at the same time. So to Paul's point, it's something that has been ingrained in the community in general, in software development community, that as a BA, you're someone who takes orders, you're someone who are documenting, you are someone who is basically sitting on the receiving end of the spectrum rather than being someone who drives it. And more recently, let me just flip over to the next slide because that kind of goes into a little bit about me. So even though I'm not actively holding a BA title, I apply a lot of those skill sets that I learned as a BA. I was a BA for almost 7 to 8 years. Had it in my title, and I actively used to pursue a lot of the skills in that space. But I slowly moved over to the product management side as well. So as I moved into the product management space, there was always this gap analysis that I was doing as to what I had and what do I need to build into. But even though these skills are something that product managers are kind of relied upon, or managers in general are looked at for, these are skills that would highly, highly help a BA as well, in the sense that they would be able to create their own space and make sure that their voice is heard, and their worth on the team is well known rather than just someone who is a pen, right? So in that respect, my background comes from the product and program management. I've been doing this for almost 12 to 15 years now. There's a bit of a gray area there because I had some hybrid roles as well, so I give myself a bit of gap there. I was fortunate enough to work in multiple domains. Fintech was my primary domain. I've been in fintech space for almost 10 years now. All the other domains were little dribbles and trickles of various areas. My background started off in engineering, but I did my MBA, a little bit of analytics as well. That's my second master's, and then I did a diploma in marketing. As and when I went through my career, I noticed that there were some skill sets that I wanted to acquire, and I supplemented them with my work experience, but it's still always good to kind of look at the theoretical side and imbibe those skills as you go along as well. Fortunate to work with different companies across the globe. I have physically lived in US, Canada, Australia, and for a short stint in Singapore as well. But in general, all the other companies that I worked with, those were offshore vendor relationships. And again, with the global sort of work life that we're going with, it's always good to be exposed to multiple cultures and understand what's good there, what's not so good there, and what is the good that you can do going in there with a unique perspective as an outsider to those cultures. And last but not the least, you might have already guessed from my pace of talking and my nonstop talking that I do enjoy public speaking. It's a lot of sharing of ideas. I've met some of the most brilliant people through these channels because they end up reaching out to me, I end up reaching out to them, and it's almost like a reciprocal mentoring scenario that's taking place. And every person that I meet in my life, I believe that they have something unique to offer me. So that's why I really enjoy this. And when you put yourself out there, there might be thousands of other people who are feeling the same as I did, vulnerable and lost in certain areas. And when you hear it from someone else saying that, hey, bad times are only temporary and you'll get onto some better places, it helped me when I heard someone else say that, and I'm hoping that it does the same for other people too. So lots of plus points in getting into this space, and I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. I usually like to do a bit of a intro about me simply because this opens up some opportunities for any coffee chats that people might want to touch base on, or if they're interested in specific areas that I experienced and they want to know more about it, then these are some opportunities. So highly encourage you to reach out to me if there's any way that I can help you, and I'm sure we'll find some sort of a mutual platform to connect on. And without further ado, I just want to reiterate why we need to empower. So my backstory that I gave you, my transition from like a BA to the product space, and then also how I am an empathetic person, but then I also needed to understand how to empower myself while being the kind of person that I am. So when we think about the global scenario as a whole, we need to understand that organizational needs are changing in general. We're no longer the mom and pop store or the mom and pop business that used to be around a long time ago. We are dealing with a lot of corporates. We're dealing with MNCs. We're dealing with companies that span across the globe. In fact, right now I'm working with Ernst & Young, which is a consulting organization, or at least in their consulting arm. It's actually a accounting financial organization, but I'm working on their consulting arm, primarily providing our services to fintech. So heavily focused on banking clients here in North America. And we've got some engagements in APAC region as well. But when we think about an organization like EY, you can think about the global needs that it has. And to have a BA who's just focusing on one specific silo may not just cut it. And you might need someone who's a bit more of, has a lot more passion, is a bit more aggressive in terms of understanding what is needed for the business, and then, owning that eventually. Roles themselves are evolving too. If you think about the prestige that sort of the BA role had a little while back, and then as you think about all the changes that have happened with technology, even IIBA is starting to incorporate a lot of these lessons. You've got the Agile package that's coming in. You've got the data analytics piece coming in. And as time goes by, there are going to be other components as well that are going to be added. So it's just by nature of being a BA, you have to be constantly updating your skills. And perhaps the BAs were called something else back in the day, and then I don't know if you've heard about this joke about the BAs, is that if there's someone in the organization that gets things done, but no one really knows what they do, we'll call them a BA. So that's how we were perceived. And then over a period of time, we started getting more into the documentation, the focus on that. And then I think now we need to slowly extract ourselves out of that documentation focus, but at the same time have a good balance of things, simply because Agile does not support documentation at all times. It does support documentation, but only to the level that is needed by the organization, rather than doing a deep dive, which was much more common in the waterfall methodology. So just owing to some of those changes that are happening, our roles are changing. The world is also becoming a hybrid working world. So we are partly working from home, partly working from our workplace. Sometimes we're not even in the country. And when you think about this combination, it's not as simple for a BA to just walk by a desk and kind of go like, hey, do you want coffee? Do you want to discuss some requirements and let's get it done? The way of communication is changing. So therefore, the level of passion that you need, the level of interest that you need, that is also changing. We are getting into an outcome-driven world. So this was a key differentiation that Silicon Valley kind of started introducing when they started bringing in product management, is what is an output versus an outcome. And a lot of times people have tough time defining what an outcome is, because it's a lot more intangible. It's a lot more fluffy, for the lack of a better term. It also tends to be something that's qualitative. And I'm sure all of you have worked with qualitative metrics. It's easier to pick on quantitative ones, but qualitative is always tough because not everyone looks at quality the same way. And therefore, when you talk about an outcome-driven world where you have to define the value, what is that value truly defined? What does it actually hold? What does it mean to different people? You have to, have a lot more facilitations and conversations to bring that to common consensus. Obviously, you have your own personal growth goals as well. I've met a few people who are very content with being a senior BA or being a BA, whichever role that suits them. But there are also a lot of people who want to grow, and sometimes the growth chart for a BA kind of stops at being a senior BA unless they start adding a few more skill sets to their basket, and they start saying, oh, I can maybe manage accounts, and that's where a bit of the sales stuff comes in. If you're going into the technical side, you might have to start learning how the technology works, the architecture, the API, and all those things work. So there's always this expectation to kind of go beyond what you know within the BA skill space if you wanted to move further up. However, with empowerment, you can still be a senior BA or an average, the intermediate or the junior BA, and still get opportunities that provide you with much more than what's within the BA space, or even give you a more enriched experience of what you're doing. So definitely, depending on your personal growth goals, this might be an opportunity for you to explore and expand further in your career. And last but not the least, tying into that, leadership is no longer just about the title. So if you go into product management, it's weird because a lot of people will call themselves a product manager, but when you ask them, who are you managing? They'll be like, oh, I'm just managing a product. I'm not managing people. So it's a lot about influential skill sets, which I think is very much relevant for BA space, because we don't really manage anyone when we try to get these requirements, but we have to influence people's understanding. We have to influence and appeal to their sense of reasoning when we're saying that, hey, this requirement makes sense because of this. It's not going to be a natural. I mean, if you have such stakeholders, kudos to you, and you're very lucky when you ask them for requirements and they give it to you immediately. But most of the time, it's a bit of, pulling teeth, pulling hair, understanding the strategy. You want to make sure that things stay in scope. So there are a lot more dynamics involved in receiving requirements. However, with influential leadership, potentially you maybe even be able to guide the direction of the project in itself. And therefore, you are getting better value in terms of what you're delivering. You're getting better work experience. You're getting better impact to the client in delivering that final value. So hopefully that kind of convinces you as to why empowerment is something that's important for you as a BA. It's not necessarily tied into your job title. It may not even be an explicit expectation of what you need to do, but it would definitely improve your quality of life as a BA and give you better visibility and presence in the company that you're with. So if for whatever reason my constant yapping just kind of distracts you, at the end of the session today, I'm hoping that these are the 3 key takeaways that you take away with you. And remember, in terms of how do you actually self-empower? So maybe this is not explicitly mentioned in your job, but what are the steps that you can take? What are the actions that you can take to actually take that power back to yourself? So the first one is having seamless curiosity. So it's just natural that if you want to grow, then you want to know more about what you're growing into. It's just absolutely natural. And have that seamless curiosity, and don't be shy about showing that to other people, right? That's where the big change is that people don't show their skills visibly. People don't show their interests visibly. But when you put that out there, I'm getting a bit philosophical here, but whatever you put out there is what will come back to you, right? There are these inspirational quotes and life-changing quotes that people talk about, and this is one of them, is the universe will give back to you what you put out there. So have that seamless curiosity and put that out there as well. Understanding strategic interests. I think this is becoming more and more important. Back in the day, yes, knowing the tactical length and breadth of what you're doing might have been sufficient, but it's getting more and more important for you to understand why we are doing certain things. What is the strategy that we're trying to achieve at the end of the day? And last but not the least, unite their passions. It does sound a bit vague here, but it's based, the there in this case is referring to the team that you're working with. So the more you are able to drive their vision together, it becomes much, much easier for you. And that's sort of what that last one is saying. And it will become more apparent as we go through the slide. So the first one here is having seamless curiosity. I don't know how many of you have heard this, but there's this concept called T-shaped skilling. And this is becoming more and more popular. When you go into agile methodology, this is also something that a lot of people talk about. And one of the things that this says is that while you should know a little bit about everything, there should be an area that you are super interested in, and that becomes your depth. Meanwhile, everything else that you know is a little bit of all the different departments, so that if you see something that's not right, you are able to figure out which specific department you're supposed to go to or which specific person you're supposed to go to. If you're brought into those initial discussions about, I'm sure as BAs, we cannot stress the fact that, bring us early enough in these project conversations so that requirements are not missed. And yet, day in, day out, every time, we are missed in some sort of discussion when it begins. On the flip side, the other thing happens, right, whereby you might be brought in, but you might not have all the insight and skills in terms of what needs to be captured and what needs to be understood. So I think this T-shaped skilling kind of accounts for both those scenarios, whereby the more the BAs are broadly knowledgeable, they are able to participate in those strategic high-level conversations, and then they're able to hone into specific areas that they are skilled in, and also reach out to other people who are able to provide that depth based on the breadth of the skills that they have. So it kind of accounts for both the situations and then solves that problem. So in this case, broaden your horizon. So always be curious about what's happening around you, right? Like take a colleague for a coffee chat. One of the systems that I actually worked on fresh out of school, I did not know what it was. It was it was called Sweep. And I had no idea what it was. It was some sort of sweep server. And there was this gentleman in my team. He must have been 55 at the time. And we went out for coffee and I just chatted with him for like 45 minutes. It was a super interesting conversation. And then I came back and I said, hey, Alan, I understand this now. And I was able to gather requirements better for that project. I was able to understand where it fit in the overall picture. It was a brand new thing that I had not learned in university before, but it was something I gained. So now I just broadened my skill set, and I realized that it was such an important exercise for me to do. I started doing that with other people too. Even if I wasn't working on their specific project, I knew that it fell in some sort of umbrella within my own immediate leader. So not my manager, but two managers removed, right? It fell under their umbrella. So I thought that this is going to be great. I'll just talk to everyone through these coffee chats and learn more about what they do. And eventually that helped me, because as I got promoted into a senior BA role, even though my job description did not require me to know about other things, I was performing at a senior account executive level because I had that insight about what was happening in my team. And therefore, even as a senior BA, I was able to play a leadership role where other senior BAs were reporting to me, and I was able to grab the information that they were providing in terms of requirements and work on a document that spanned multiple departments, as opposed to my counterpart who was also a senior BA, but they were focusing specifically on the department that we were part of. So showing that initiative and saying that, hey, I'm interested to learn more, you start opening those doors and you kind of take the power back onto yourself. Understanding perspectives and bringing new ones, right? So as you learn about new things, like I said, I was able to ask questions better, which meant that my requirement quality was much better too. Integration insights, and this is something that we need to work on a lot more these days, because there are thousands of APIs out there, thousands of integration points today. Whenever you look at a product in the market, you're looking at a very small sliver of specialization that's out there. And anything more, you need to go to a second vendor, a third vendor, and a fourth vendor. So banking applications have now become larger than, crazy mammoth levels, right? So now you have to understand integration and how things work. And what better way to do this other than knowing what these different points are, which becomes your breadth, and then focusing on one specific system that you are truly interested in. And last but not the least, going back to the example that I gave, it really allows you to have a bird's eye view, which means that you are in line for leadership or preparing yourself for leadership. As a leader, you might not be looking at every tactical aspect of a specific project, but you need to know what the overall map looks like. And as you start looking at all these different components in the department that you're working on, or within the ecosystem of the product that you're working on, you start getting those ideas about, oh, this is what we need to do here. This is the improvement that we need to do here. This is the efficiency that we need to change here. And you might even become or come into that position where you start suggesting these opportunities to your leader. In my case, the leader was 2 levels above. And I casually ran into him in the kitchen and I made this comment to him saying that, hey, we've been integrating with this system, but I feel like if we actually do it through this system, this might provide us better data because this is what the front end brand staff are using versus this is something that's a secondary level of information that we're getting from. So just by giving, dropping those pieces of insights, you're getting some of these leaders to think, because eventually it's their job to understand these strategies. And when you provide that sort of an input to them, this is going to be very helpful in their analysis, which guess what happens when they think about the next leader to come up? They'll probably remember the suggestions that you have made, and then how that has brought better outcome for the department as a whole, not necessarily in direct revenue, but if it actually reduces some costs, it reduces some pain points, it improves the bank's efficiency overall, you've already made a hit with them, right? So it's really good to think about those aspects as to what are the things that your leadership is actually thinking about, and use that through your initiative to highlight it back to them, because they are not really involved in the day-to-day tactical stuff surrounding that. So that was a seamless curiosity. The next one is strategic interest. So it goes without saying that these days, if you don't understand what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to work for, you're basically working behind this black screen where you've just shut yourself out from the world, right? Most of my experience in software development comes from mobile banking applications. And I truly, truly enjoyed that, because whatever change I made, I could see immediate changes on the customer side, on the client side, the user side. I didn't have to wait for something to happen. So as soon as we would push in these mobile app changes, I could see it immediately. And that made me very excited. Maybe I was a nerd that way. But on the other hand, I was also the client of the bank that I was working with. So I would immediately see those changes and I'm like, oh my God, I've just made my life so much easier by putting this through. So understanding what is the final outcome, understanding who is it that you're trying to help, understanding what kind of change it's going to bring to their life, and therefore the value, the improvement in the value of that relationship is a key understanding that you need to start making, rather than just looking at documents and going, okay, the customer has these items that are going to be released to them. But what does it mean after the end of that release? What is it that we're going to improve for them is something that you should know. And these are part of your 30-second elevator pitches. When someone comes to you and asks, oh, I heard that there's a change going out this weekend. What is it going to do? Think about it. Are they going to be understanding that, oh, we're going to be connecting to API XYZ and we're going to be pulling ABC data and we're going to be pushing that through this system so that it provides a calculation, and then that would be displayed to the customer? Or if you tell the other story whereby the customers will now be able to see what sort of changes will come through to their interest rate if they have a mortgage with the bank. That is the difference in storytelling. And every time you understand the strategy behind a specific change, your level of communication, your quality of communication is going to improve by that much. Once you've hooked this person into this 30-second elevator pitch, if they're interested to delve deeper, then you can start going into the details. But your intention should not be to put them to sleep in the first 30 seconds. It is to really hook them in, and then you can start going into much more detail. So that was one aspect of it as a whole. But apart from that, you can also apply these strategic interests to your personal career growth. So in this case, learn what your boss does. Because it's not just about what you do, but eventually what gets to your boss, your next level boss, and your next level boss, right? Because eventually they're the people who are running the organization. So what is it that keeps them awake at night? What are the things that they are responsible for? Imagine the amount of joy your manager is going to have if every piece of communication that you're sending to him is formatted in a way that he can send directly to his manager. You're cutting the middle level of effort that this person has to take, and they'll be like, oh, this is someone who understands leadership. This is someone who's able to tell us what needs to be done. This is someone who understands my job and therefore is going to make my life easier. So the next time when their boss asks them, who do you want to promote, guess whose name's going to come up? It's going to be yours, because you've taken that sense of empowerment within yourself. Learning the business, that was the point that we made about earlier. Who are your users? What are you giving them? What is the plus point that you're giving them? Learning what your product is. What is it that you're actually selling? Now, in the bank, it was a massive bank, and I was specifically working on mobile application development, and my domain was specifically personal clients. So I looked at checking account, savings account, credit cards, mortgage, line of credit, and everything that a specific individual client might need. But that in itself, understanding the ins and outs, understanding which systems it kind of went in, through, that itself took me about 8 to 12 months to understand what was happening. After that, the extension of that knowledge, how do we strategically improve that? That took a bit longer as well. So every time you're learning something new about the product, and then every time this product reacts to market changes, when Bank of Canada actually changed their rates, what happened to the actual rates that we're offering? How does that work? The economics behind it, the finance behind it, understanding that whole piece as a business allowed me to have more deeper discussions with my business partners, allowed me to have more engaging conversations with managers who are like twice or thrice removed from my level. They understood that I was someone strategic, and I understood the reasons why market was, changing things that we were offering as products. So having that sort of insight, again, will put you above the rest, because you've taken that initiative to understand a lot more than what you're just offered. Needless to say, learn who your customer is. One of the best sources of understanding who your customer is to talk to your front-end staff. That could be the client contact center, that could be the branch staff. Look at the list of complaints that they've documented. What are the things that customers are most irked about? In fact, product managers, when they're trying to prioritize some of the features that they want to release, that's the first place that they go to, is to identify what sort of problems are out there and how do you prioritize what's most important to work on. So imagine that coming over to the BA side, and you actually have that insight in saying that these are products or these are features that the customer loves, and these are the features that the customer hates. What can we do? Bringing this strategic insight. So instead of the tech team relying on the business team to come up and tell something to us, what if the tech team started taking that power, and you as a BA are able to give them these insights and saying that, hey, I think we need to modify our XYZ feature because look at how dismal the performance of this feature is. If we start looking at some ways of improving this, we take it back to the business and we give them a proposal. Imagine how good that's going to make your technology leader look. Compared to the business leader who probably didn't even have these insights. The sad part is most of the analytics, most of the tracking, most of the reports are all generated by the technical team, but most of the time the technical team doesn't really look at it. The insights, I'm saying, not just generating the report, but extracting the what is in it, or why is it important? What is the value? That perspective is never looked at by the technical team themselves. So invariably, every proposal comes from the business side, and the tech team just ends up being, okay, give it to me, I'll work on it. Okay, give it to me, I'll work on it, rather than being the driver of the changes that come through. So that's a massive, change in the thought process as to where some of these proposals are coming from. And last but not the least, it's this quote I actually heard in one of my regional language movies that I watched, and I just tried to translate that back into English here. So knowledge is most powerful when it's applied at the right place at the right time. It's not really important that you realize that, water conducts electricity. Cool. But when you see a live wire that's fallen into a puddle of water during a thunderstorm or something, you need to think twice before stepping into that pool. So that's why knowledge is so powerful, not because you read it in a textbook or you knew about something. So making those connections, thinking on your feet, bringing that strategic thinking into whatever you do day in, day out will make a massive difference in terms of how people view you as someone who's a leader and someone who's empowered to do the tasks that they're supposed to be doing and more, right? So that's strategic interests. And last but not the least, uniting people. The kind of power that you have Surely by holding that requirements document in your hand is a lot, simply because you basically have answers to all the questions that people will ever have about this project. Who started this project? Why was this project done? Who are the key stakeholders? Who are the funders? Who are the sponsors? Who are the people who are going to be most upset about this? Who are the users? What are the non-technical requirements? What are the technical requirements? You pretty much hold the key to every question that people may ask in that document that you're holding. And when you have that level of detail, imagine the number of permutations of use cases and business cases that you can come up with for every person who's a naysayer out there. So if one of your developers comes to you and goes, I don't understand why we are doing this initiative because it doesn't make any sense to me. Guess what? Now you have the business case from the business and you can tell them, hey, this is the reason why we are doing this. A tester may come and tell you, it's like, hey, I don't understand why we are doing this. This is supposed to be connected to this, but this is all broken down. Now you have the requirement detail to inform them as well. And as you're having these conversations, you're appealing to each one of their passions in believing that the initiative that you're working on is indeed useful. I know a lot of times, and I'm speaking very optimistically here, but I know personally a lot of times in my life as well, when I was working on specific projects, I'm like, I don't understand why we're working on this. It makes absolutely no sense. And I just had to put my head down and work on it simply because there was some sort of a political situation happening, or there was someone who was somebody's best friend and we just had to please them. Did it actually make sense to work on that project? No, and I agreed with the rest of my team, but at the same time there were powers above us that were playing at the time, and I didn't necessarily know how to use my empowerment or how to use my ability or strength with the details that I had to sway their decision. But as time went by, I started learning how. I understood how I can present myself in terms of saying that, hey, this is not a good decision because of this. How do you do that communication? How you bring that up in serious meetings or big meetings where you normally don't speak and you only listen? Those are skill sets that you need to learn, because as you get promoted in your career ladder, you're going to start interacting with people who are of that power or that caliber. And you need to understand how to position your communication based on that. How do you do your due diligence at the back end? You can't just go into the meeting and kind of say, oh, this is never going to work, but not provide them with the supporting detail. How do you make sure that you have everything, every duck lined up in a row properly before you make that statement in a big meeting? So having access to those requirements gives you a lot of superpower because you have a lot of knowledge. It's just a matter of positioning that in the right way to the team that you're working with. The stakeholder management allows you to understand everyone's why. So when you're gathering requirements from each of these different stakeholders, you know what is it that they're passionate about. You know what is it that drives them. So when you understand that little secret, guess what's the best way of convincing them if something didn't really go according to plan is to use those little snippets of detail that you have in knowing that, okay, this is what drives this person, so let me position the proposition in a way that he likes. And that individual stakeholder relationship management that you're having is going to help you build a relationship with this person. And in the long term, you're going to build a very trustworthy network where people would be like, I trust this person. And therefore, the next time when you go back to them and suggest something, guess what? They're going to accept what you're saying with less friction. I'm not saying there won't be any friction, but less friction than what was there before. Bringing them together for harmony. And this is my comment about influential leadership in general. These people are not going to be directly reporting to you. So you have to appeal to their senses. You have to appeal to their logic in helping them understand that, yes, this is the good path forward. And this is the reason why. Why don't we work together as a team? Make sure that we've got each other's backs. Especially in agile methodology, when you have, quick sprints that are happening, you want people to be verbal. You want people to bring up any issues and not hide them under the rug, because the later you discover it, the more issues there are going to be. But at the same time, there might be some organizations that are much more punitive in nature because you brought up something and therefore people just stop telling you stuff that goes bad. But when you appeal to their passions and you show them that it's more of a supportive environment, even if the overall organization is punitive, you might actually have a good working relationship with these people, and they might be more passionate towards the solution that you're trying to build. And last but not the least, that aspect of united vision that you're trying to build is a sign of leadership. It might not be part of your job description, but when you know that the 5 or 6 people that you're working within your agile team look up to you, they respect you, guess what? Whenever there is a performance related conversation that comes up and everyone is talking about you as a good leader, it would just be natural for your management to look at you and your profile and promote you to the next level because you're able to bring that drive in the team. Right? So it's just a natural succession and it doesn't need to be part of your title, but it's just part of your own passion and how you want to chart your own career path. So that was the end of my conversation. So I hope that was helpful. So to reiterate the key takeaways, have seamless curiosity. This is where you need to do your T-shaped scaling. This is where you need to make sure that you're looking out for things that are not necessarily in your plate, but you just want to know about. Next is understanding the strategic interests. So knowing why you're doing certain things, what it's in it for your department to do it. What is in it for your organization to do it? What is it that your customer is looking for? What is the branding? What is the social standing of your company in with respect to the community as a whole? And last but not the least, unite your team's passion. So use your knowledge in your favor to bring everyone's thought process together and then guide them together as a leader. Happy to take questions, and I've also thrown in my LinkedIn profile link over there if you would like to connect or ask any further questions that we may not cover as part of today's session. I will stop sharing my screen because I can barely see you guys if you are there. Hey,
Thank
Paul.
Hello, thank you, Barney. That was awesome. There were a couple of things that really resonated with me through that. And then one of the things that came out to me strongly, and it's something another passion of mine, is that building strong relationships with your stakeholders is part of empowering yourself. And I think one of the things that I've been guilty of in the past as well is that thinking that I've got to have all the answers. Because and that's not true. I don't have to have all. I need to know how to find the people who've got the answers and all. So for me, the really strong message comes through is just that strong relationship with your stakeholders is part of your whole empowering process.
Yeah.
It was
To
a
your
question.
point, sorry, I
Yes.
just wanted to add one more thing because you brought something up in my mind, and that's one of the reasons why T-shaped skilling kind of works, right? Because it's not just about knowing what these things are, but if you don't know, who do you reach out to? And through that, you build that, hub and spoke type of concept, and you're bringing people together towards a common vision rather than, as you said, pretending that I know everything, which is never the case.
Yeah. Excellent.
Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No worries. And guys, feel free to post a question in the chat. I have unmuted it or allowed everyone to unmute themselves. So if you can't unmute, just put your hand up and let me know. But that's a nice segue because one of the questions that came out in your whilst you're presenting was what are some of the core examples in that T shape for when it comes to specialization? Now I can think of a few, but over to you.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think the first thing is to figure out what kind of BA you're going to be, right? I think that's sort of what drives what your core is going to be. This is something that I teach as part of one of the courses that I run is that where do you see this BA role kind of sitting in the organization? If you're thinking about a 2x2 matrix, you've got the business side, you've got the technical side, you've got the strategy side, and you've got the tactical side. So when you look at those four quadrants, depending on where you are, you need to identify what's the skill that's most important to you. So if you're part of like an agile team, you're probably going to be technical and you're going to be tactical. So in that sense, my recommendation would be to focus on specific technical skills that your team works on. That should be your core. That should be your depth. But anything above on top of that would probably be things like, oh, what are some of the other technical skills that the other teams are working on? What are some of the soft skills that I need so that I can take this and present it to a business audience? Those would be my broad skills. On the flip side, if you were looking at something like the strategic side, but tactical, this is where your data and analysis or financial analysis, I'm just giving an example from fintech because I've been in fintech space, but thinking about, risk models or investment models and things like that, that's where your depth will start coming in. But then your T-shape would be what sort of applications do these kind of go into apart from Excel spreadsheets, right? And then if you go into the other quadrants respectively, you will have a specific core that you want to focus on and then a generic one. The generic one, the set of skills that I would recommend goes without saying is communicating, especially to leaders who are above your rank. I think as BAs, we often also carry the mantle of presentations for some reason. They just assume that since we are good at documenting, we're good at communication, and that's how a lot of things got thrown at me because I was a horrible introvert in university. I actually used to stutter, and there were times when you could see me sweating and almost close to fainting if I had to make a public presentation. And now people can't get me to shut up on stage. So there's a massive change in terms of how that happened. And that was simply because I'm grateful because a lot of people pushed me to the stage and they said, present this on behalf of the team. So that communication is definitely something that should go broadly. And then understanding what some of the other teams are working on should also go broadly. But what you want to focus on specifically is entirely up to you, depending on where you fall in that quadrant.
Yeah, yeah, great answer. And I just want to kind of just disagree with you on one thing, that we're all good documenters. I'm not a good documenter, and I make a very bold and clear statement to my clients, like I hate documentation. But yeah, but and I'm also an introvert, and being able to do this stuff is learned behavior that
Yes.
I've had to actually get. I also used to stand up and sweat whenever I had to give a presentation. So but it's interesting just coming back to that whole T shape. I mean, just to further on your answer there. I mean, and it's going to lead me into another question for you that I have. But I think, you're so right. You've got to find out where you fit, and there are different areas. Like I grew up in the financial world as well, in fintech as well. And now I work in local government, and I work in defense force and that kind of thing. Um, and I think what that says is that T-shape changes over time, and you've got to move and shift with that time. And I'm probably going to give my age away because, yeah, is that I remember when email came in, and how
Me
that
too.
shifted my job. I mean, that's way back, and now how I had to think differently back then once email came into effect. Now, please, no one judge me for my age. I'm only 16. Um, but just to give you some examples, I mean, you've got to look at, like, if you want to go to T-shaped, it could be an industry, it could be finances versus healthcare or whatever, or you could look at things like that specialize in cybersecurity or data analytics. So excuse me. So there are various ways to slice and dice, and so I don't think the answer is quite as simple as just saying, yeah, think of these things. You've got to figure out where you fit into that thing. And that's interesting because, and this is leading me into the question that I had now, is that when we talk about that T-shaped and specializing, one of the things I find a lot of younger junior BAs like myself doing is they try and specialize too early. It's like get in the market, get in your job, and start to play around and do things and things like that. So, for instance, for me, I mean, I started off with data modeling and data mining when I was first. I hated it. I hate that side of business analysis. I'm more on the strategic side. I enjoy that side. So, a question for you. I mean, sort of like, what's your suggestion to someone who's trying to find their specialization and that pathway and considering the T-shape?
I love the question, and it's great that you also started off with something you hated. Same thing with me. I started off as a coder, detested it, especially debugging. Oh my goodness, I wanted to kill myself so many times. But then I was like, no suicidal thoughts. That's not good. But yes, it happens to all of us, right? And one of the main reasons why I think your advice is ringing so strongly is that if in the beginning part of your career you can identify things that you do not like, guess what? For the rest of your life, you're probably not going to like it either. But if there are things that you've not explored so far and it's still something that you want to grow into, you still have the rest of your life to explore it. So I think that part about finding out what you don't like is more important than finding what you do like, because there's always something to look out for or
Mm,
look towards to
yeah.
keep building. Um, so, in my opinion, the way that they can do is get involved in different types of activities at work. When I started off in my first job, and volunteering is a big lifesaver. Personally, for me, my entire set of marketing skills that I built were completely from my nonprofit pursuits.
Oh,
I did
yes.
pro bono consulting. I did not get into a consulting job immediately. I know a lot of my classmates went in as soon as they went in. I mean, as soon as they graduated. And my dad asked me this question. He was like, okay, so you want to go into consulting. Consulting is about solving problems for other people. What do you know about their life that you're going to go in and solve problem for right now? Tell me. And I was like, I don't know. Someone will tell me. It's like, see, that's why you won't make a good consultant. You need to learn what the problems are first before
Mm.
you go out there and fix it. So I understood where he was coming from. So what I did was whatever I did not get in my full-time role, I accounted for that in my voluntary role, or I used to do freelancing as well. I was freelancing for almost 4 years. About 3 years ago, I stopped because I couldn't take it anymore in terms of my time management. But until then, I was freelancing. I did UX design, I did marketing design, I did logo design. I just tried out everything as a freelancer. I wasn't looking for great pay because I had my full-time job and I was trying these out. Companies have internship opportunities. Companies have secondment opportunities. You can also talk to your manager to see, hey, I really would like to try out this role. Can I do that role for a few months? In fact, in my last company, I was part of the central operations team. I was the director of business analysis and process analysis. But I talked to my boss and I said, hey, I really enjoyed the research and advisory side of it. Can I try that side? And he said, yes, go for it. Work there for 3 months and see how things are. And luckily at that time, my project was tapering off. So it was perfect time for me to try something else. And I did that. They liked me. I loved it. And then eventually I transitioned into that new role. So every time you have to look out for these opportunities and don't be scared to try out new things.
Yep.
Do your due diligence in investigating what it is. Talk to a few people. Coffee chats are a lovely medium to share ideas without the banality of like sitting through a lunch and learn, right? So it's just like,
Mm.
oh, what do you feel? What do you feel? And pick people who you gel with in some way because they probably have the same attitude as you towards life in general. So if they say something sucks, you can kind of take it with a grain of salt and ask them, why do you think it's bad or why do you think it's good? And then use that towards your own character and behavior to see if it'll be a good fit. So I highly recommend exploring internship opportunities, secondment opportunities, working with someone as a job shadower even. When I was coding in the beginning, I did about 3 weeks of internship with a company where I was literally just job shadowing someone who was coding. I would watch what they were doing. I would sit with them, work through the algorithms that they were trying to work, and it just gave me an insight into what their life was about. Um, Now that we are in the virtual environment, there are lots of opportunities for you to like hit people up in different time zones as well. So if you feel that 9 to 5 in New Zealand is when you're working, maybe you can call up someone in the west side of the globe and see if they're available from like 5 to 7 your time, but it's morning time for them. Just jump on a Zoom call and ask them to kind of share what they're doing in their day-to-day life. Of course, barring any confidential information about the
Yeah.
company, but you can do some job shadowing there. Volunteering is a big one. I know of some companies here in States. It's called catchafire.org. It's called skills-based volunteering. They post specific roles that they need help for, like set up Salesforce, create a marketing newsletter. And if you want to apply those specific skills, you only work on those projects and you slowly build them out. Look at free certification. Salesforce is a great example because they've built this whole trailhead system where you can go and see what the system is like, understand if you are interested in it. I recently discovered Google has a whole bunch of certifications that you can take for free, and then you can even apply for those roles. You can even freelance, and people are making up to $1 million just working on ad space because they know how the algorithm works and how that's trending, right? Now, if you have all that knowledge and you're applying that as part of your BA work, imagine the amount of value that you're increasing for your client, for your own organization. And the last one that I wanted to talk about was just attend webinars like these and talk to professionals who have been in that space for a long time. What is it that drives them? And if you are driven by the same thing as them, then maybe that role is for you. If you're not, then maybe it's not. So doing that sort of a holistic approach to what you want to do and what you want to specialize in will really help, especially in the beginning part of your career. And I'm very grateful that people trusted and believed in me to go through different roles in the beginning.
Yes.
I can't say that everyone had that chance. It did two things for me. One is I was able to explore my skill set. And the other thing is I really loaded up on empathy because now as a product manager, when I walk in and I tell something to my team, I'm like, I know what the developer is thinking. I know what the tester is thinking because I was in each of their positions at some point in time. So
Mm.
my language, the way I communicate to them has changed radically because of that experience.
Yeah, awesome. And I think there's a lot of things that I connect with. Is there anyone that has a question? And otherwise, I'll ask my final question. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Whilst we're waiting, I know, I mean, a lot of what I've learned has come from my volunteering in the IBS. I'm on the marketing um, role, and I've learned so much in that role that I've actually now applied within my own business and also within my clients in helping them as well. Um, I just want to kind of touch on the thing you talked about self-empowerment earlier in your slides, and I think that that's so important to understand that self-empowerment is the one thing that is in your power and in your hands to take control of. And you touched earlier, but on in your response in the previous question is, and that involves continuous learning. It's continuously going out there and reading stuff, attending webinars, learning stuff. I've just completed a course at Auckland University in cybersecurity and forensics. So you might see me on some crime site one of these days and doing some forensic analysis. No, joking. No, but I mean, that's, sort of like what's it, Hawaii CSI kind of thing. But yeah, but it was really interesting to do that course. And lo and behold, today I was on holiday last week and I come back today and the very first email I read was something to do with I need to do a piece of work and it's going to involve some digital forensics for the client that I'm working on. So there we
Nice.
go. Great stuff. Any final word before we close it from your side?
The only thing I would like to say is just explore the opportunities. I mean, the world is an oyster. I know it's a cliche term, but it cannot be said enough. And I think the only person who's really holding you back from your progress is yourself, right? The more you think that you can't do something, the more you'll start believing in it. So I think some of these softer qualities as a BA are things that you need to explore on your own. And I highly encourage, because this was something that I was interviewing someone last week. So I'm a VJ as well for a YouTube channel that I'm part of. So I was interviewing this pageant winner, and she was telling me that, usually people say that if you ask a question, there's 50% chance that they'll say yes or 50% that they'll say no. But she actually increased the percentage, and she said, if you ask people that you've built good relationship with, then 80% chance is that they will say yes, 20 maybe no. So I was like, oh my God, that's even more powerful than we normally say. It's not a 50-50 chance, it's an 80-20 because you have invested in these relationships
Yeah.
and they trust you enough to give you a chance. So I would like to echo the same thing, and I hope that that way you can build your career to be something that's a bit more fruitful than just something that puts the bread on the table.
Great stuff. Manu, again, thank you very much. A really insightful conversations we've had today. To everyone that attended, thank you for attending. I hope you got something out of it. I will post a recording. Sorry, did I ask you permission that I can post a recording?
Yes, yes, it's
Cool.
fine.
Yeah, I can't remember if I had asked you. Yeah, so I will post that. I'll post it out in the next day or two. To everyone. And again, thank you everyone for attending and see you in the next webinar and maybe see some of you. I can see some names already that I'm going to see next Friday. Fiona, Jonathan, we'll see you at the Festival of Business Analysis. So thank you everyone and enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you.